Good morning. This is a holiday week, and the evidences of that are around us. We have some visitors with us this morning. We're glad you're here, and we hope you'll be back at every opportunity. Some of our number are traveling. We certainly pray for them and their safe travels, and we do have a number that are sick with the cold weather and the flu season, and with COVID just not quite ready to turn loose yet. We've got a number who are a little under the weather. We want to remember them. Remember Mark and Kim, Ed and Linnell, I understand, are not able to be with us today with some illness, and also in Chris's family, some flu perhaps, and the Leeser family and others. So I guess, and I think Mary Ann Posh is still under the weather this morning. You know, Satan has a way of continuing to put obstacles and discouragements in front of people if we allow that to happen. And I personally think that whenever people are getting very serious about serving the Lord and a congregation is growing or working hard, I think Satan notices that. So we need to keep our focus on Jesus Christ, who can see us through. He is our pilot, as the song says. And by the way, that was a great song, Roland. I don't know that I have sung that song before. That was a new one on me, but I appreciate the words to it and a great sentiment. This coming Wednesday evening, because it is a holiday, many of our teachers will be traveling this week. A number of our students will be away, and the classes will not be meeting as usual on Wednesday evening. We'll be having a devotional here in the auditorium. I want to encourage all of you to be present for that at 7 o'clock. And the focus of the devotional will be on Thanksgiving, giving thanks for our salvation and the need to be sharing our salvation with others. Not just because of the national holiday on Thursday, but as Brother John mentioned in the prayer, that's an attitude of Christians every day. This is an appropriate time that we're reminded of that, so that'll be our plan for Wednesday evening. We look forward to that. This morning we come to the conclusion of a short series of sermons that we've been looking at entitled Jesus, the Politically Incorrect Evangelist, and it's based upon his interaction with this woman from Samaria there at the well. And we've seen that Jesus demonstrates for us at least 20 techniques that are instructive and as an example for us. We've seen that he did not allow cultural differences to close the door of personal evangelism, that he loved people and could relate to their circumstances in life. He overcame fatigue. He used techniques to do that, incidentally. He began by engaging in friendly conversation. He chose a time when others were not around. There was no intent to embarrass or to put anybody on the spot in an inappropriate way. He was not put off by potentially offensive statements. He offered her something more than she had. He led her from the physical to the spiritual. He did not ignore sin in his conversation with her. He emphasized sincerity and truth in this interaction. He identified the Savior, himself, Jesus Christ. He was willing to use sometimes unconventional methods. He used one contact to lead to many other contacts. He sacrificed physical comforts for spiritual opportunities. And then last week, in the 15th place, we saw that he believed that there are always souls ready for harvest. Techniques. This morning we look at the last 5 of these, 20 techniques that are demonstrated by Jesus. The 16th one could be stated this way from verse 37, that Jesus recognized that some conversions are going to require time. They're going to require more time than others. You know, in my preaching years, I've had situations where people came to me essentially without any prior study between us, they were ready to be baptized. Now, there had been work going on, perhaps studying with others. Some of them had been attending my preaching, my teaching for, in some cases, for years. They were taught. They came to me and they wanted to be baptized, and they were ready to be baptized right then. I've also had situations where people were not ready to be baptized right then. They needed to be taught, and it took more time. This verse says, verse 36 rather, and he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathereth fruit unto life eternal, that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together. Number 16 should be what's on the screen before you. I'm sorry, I don't have these monitors on right in front of me, but I got mixed up there. This is number 16, that Jesus saw joy in the future of both the soul winner and the soul won. So he sees the good things that are going to come from this conversion and the joy that awaits the saved soul. You know, there's no greater joy on earth than soul winning, leading someone who is sincerely seeking the truth to obedience of the gospel. And it's contagious, and it's addictive. If we can just get our members to teach one person, they won't need to be told to do it again. They won't be able to stop because it's contagious and it's addictive. You begin to see the joy involved in soul winning. Like the old song says, sowing in the sunshine, sowing in the shadows, fearing neither clouds nor winter's chilling breeze. By and by the harvest and the labor ended, we shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. Yes, there is joy. Now let me introduce this, which I started to mention earlier. It's his number 17. He did recognize that some conversions are going to require more time than others. Here's your verse, 37. And herein is that saying true, one soweth and another reapeth. Have you ever tried to teach somebody and you felt like you were working and teaching and sharing the gospel and praying and laboring? It just didn't seem to be happening. And sometimes much time passes. Maybe years go by. Somebody else comes along perhaps and steps into that opening, and there is additional teaching or under some other context, and time has passed. You know, we talked about the window of opportunity. Sometimes the window of opportunity is open only briefly, and then it closes. But you know, sometimes that window may open again. It may not be right now. It may be sometime into the future. Some conversions require time. Rome was not built in a day. Patience is absolutely critical in soul winning. Remember, we're operating on God's timetable, not necessarily ours. We might think, man, it's time that this person obey the gospel. It's time that they step out and are baptized into Christ for the remission of their sins, like the Bible says. Well, it may not happen today, and it may require some time. Remember, Jesus said, before he left his apostles, and when he was talking about sending the Comforter to them, he made this statement before that in John 16 and verse 12. He says, I have yet many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. You can't bear them now. You see, Jesus knew that it took time to develop a mental and spiritual maturity to a point sufficient to receive the truth. Let's try to remember, folks, that we're operating on God's timetable. Be patient. Don't try to rush the process inappropriately. Number 18. Jesus recognized that some conversions require more than one teacher. Yes, maybe more than one method. When Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, the first letter particularly, he was dealing with the problem of division in the church. Remember, some were following after Apollos, and others after Cephas or Peter, and others after Paul, and so on. The Apostle Paul dealt with that issue, and then he boiled it down into very practical terms. What then is, or who then is Apollos? And what is Paul? Ministers through whom ye believed, and each as the Lord gave to him. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5. And then in verse 6, he says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. You see in that more than one teacher was involved in their conversions, and that sometimes more than one method is necessary. That's why back on the Personal Evangelism Resource Center there in the foyer to your right as you leave, you need to check out the different methods that are available. You may find that the Jewel Miller method works very well for you. You may find that the Back to the Bible method works better for you. You may find that one of these methods works better for this particular study, but the other method will work better in this one. It might depend on the age of the people being taught, or their circumstances, their spiritual maturity, their depth of understanding, many, many other variables. You decide. God gives us methods. He doesn't specify and say, you must always use this one. But he gives us many tools in the toolbox and expects us to get to work in teaching the lost. Jesus recognized that some conversions are going to be done by more than one teacher or method. And then number 19, Jesus rearranged his schedule when necessary, particularly when souls were at stake. I'm quite sure he did that for their eternal welfare, for the benefit of those souls. But you know what? He also did that to teach you and me. We can look back on Jesus' example and see, you know, that works. That's what I'm going to have to do. When we sit down in an elders meeting, or elders and preachers, or elders and preachers and deacons, what's the first thing that we discuss? What's the first priority when a preacher walks into his office? How many times this year have you talked about non-Christians who sit in the pews Sunday after Sunday? When was the last time you talked about a strategy for reaching their soul with the gospel of Christ? Before we talk about repaving the parking lot or replacing the roof or building a new fellowship hall or painting the auditorium, all of which things are important. This isn't to minimize any of those things. But before we talk about the physical, may we talk about the spiritual? May we rearrange our schedule when souls are at stake? That's what Jesus did. Maybe we should make an appointment to discuss the lost spiritually. Remember that in that Great Commission, Matthew 28, and Jesus told them to go into all the world, make disciples of every nation. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be condemned, shall be lost. Mark chapter 15 or 16, verses 15 and 16. He said, if you do these things there in Matthew 28, lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Emphasis on the spiritual. Let's rearrange our schedule when souls are at stake. Now, if I may, I want to share with you the last of these 20 items, which I would word it this way. Jesus knew that one person cannot reach all types of people. A team approach is sometimes more effective. A team of people working together to share the gospel, and maybe utilizing a team of methodology, as we've already discussed. Occasionally, I have heard discussions in business meetings long gone by, thankfully, about, we can't do this particular work because we can't see where it's producing any baptisms. We don't want to have any more gospel meetings because we don't see any baptisms. We don't want to have any more of this because we can't put up any baptisms on the board. Folks, we must realize this is a team approach. This is a team of methods by a team of dedicated Christians, that they all work together. Somebody says, how many people were baptized as a result of a gospel meeting? I don't know the answer. You know who knows the answer to that? God, and only God. These things work part of the way, and then some other method comes along and works another part of the way. Another method helps further the way. And the conversion process is not the result usually of one particular thing or person. It's a cooperation of all of these things, working together and using all of the tools and the methods that the Lord has given to us. Did you know that some people are better at reaching a particular person than others? Could it be that that person that you are trying to reach could be better reached by somebody else? Now, does that mean you should stop trying? Oh, not at all. But enlist the help of others and other methods that may work better for that person. Did you know that sometimes young people are more easily reached by young people? Now, that isn't always the case. Some young people are quite responsive to the approach of an older person. So we're going to have to figure that out as we go. But Jesus knew that one person is not going to do it all. He's not going to reach all types of people. That's why the church is pictured as a team of workers pulling together in this endeavor. Now, with that thought, that being number 20, and that's the last one on that list, but I want to transition into something into which this leads. We've talked about 20 techniques that our Lord demonstrates here in this one conversion account, one interaction. Did you know that you can take the interactions that Jesus had with different people and do the same thing? These 20 techniques that he used on this occasion can be greatly multiplied. You'll see that Jesus used many different techniques on many different occasions. He was the master teacher. And he knew which techniques were appropriate in each case. Now you may be thinking, okay, how does this translate now into practice here at Central? We have spent 4 weeks looking at Jesus' interaction with this woman from Samaria. Suppose that we could identify, which our elders have done in cooperation with Rob Whitaker and the School of Evangelism, suppose we could identify 20 areas of work. These would be the areas that I mentioned last week. In addition to an overall coordinator, there's the contact, the prospect list, the point of contact, the bookmark, the visitors, the house-to-house publication, the new movers program, the door knocking program, the digital media, the community outreach, compassion cards, meals, benevolence, it's 2 different items, visit, the PERC or Personal Evangelism Resource Center that we've mentioned, the Bible studies, the baptisms, new converts, mentoring, and growing church. Now suppose if you have 20 items listed there, you could picture 20 areas of work. Because I know what's happening. There are those who are sitting here thinking, Bob, I would love to conduct a Bible study. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that, at least not now. Okay. Did you know that conducting the Bible study is just one of these 20 areas of work? And even in that particular area, there are many variations that lead up to the actual conducting of the Bible study. There's other things that have to be done to make that happen. So if I'm not able to conduct a Bible study right now, can I do something else? Let me illustrate this by focusing on two of these areas this morning with you. In the time that we have left, I want to take two of those 20. Now, this isn't to say that these are more important than the other 20, the other 18. Let's look at compassion cards for a moment. What are compassion cards? Out in the foyer under the counter there where we have set up the Personal Evangelism Resource Center, there are some cardboard boxes full of cards. These are beautiful cards. They are appropriate for many different occasions. Suppose that the elders asked one of our deacons, let's say, to be the coordinator of this compassion cards effort. And let's say that Mark Norris, as the deacon, was asked by the elders to do this. Now, that doesn't mean that Mark Norris has to do all of this work. As a matter of fact, it would be a huge mistake for Mark, as he knows, to even begin to think that he was going to do this. All of this work falling on one person. No, he's the coordinator. He is going to need those who are willing to send cards, write and send cards. Now let's suppose, for example, that Mark decides we're going to have 4 weekly teams. I put a question mark there because this is up to the coordinator. There are many ways to do this. This is just one way. Let's suppose that he can identify 4 weekly teams. Would you like to be on one of those teams? Would you be willing, say, for example, to stay for a half an hour after services once a week and write compassion cards as a team? Or maybe take them home and write them at home, whatever suits your schedule. Did you know that the cards are provided? We have boxes of them, beautiful cards. And let's suppose, just as an example, that on each of those teams you could come up with 8 members of the congregation. 8 members on a team, which would give you 32 members every month writing cards. Think of this. Now, I don't know how many cards you could write in a month. You might say, well, I could probably write 10 or 20 cards in a month. But let's be conservative for a moment and say that each member who's on these teams would do 5 cards. 5 cards per team member. You know, that comes to 160 cards every month that are coming out of the Central Church of Christ in Martinsburg, West Virginia. And these cards are special cards. They are handwritten. They're not pre-printed off of a computer. They're not automated or generated mechanically. That, you know, like when you call up some business and the business says, "We care about your opinion." And this is a recording that's being played to 50,000 people all over the United States. "Oh, we care about you as a person." No, these are cards that are handwritten to a particular person. They're personalized cards. Now, if you're sending out 5 cards each month and the price happens to be, say, 60 cents a card, that's $3 a month. If you cannot afford $3 a month, the church will pay the postage. But you know what? The church isn't going to run them through the postage meter, the church meter. They're going to be sent with a stamp that's personally applied to each and every one. When a person receives that kind of personal card with a handwritten message, and it'll say something like, "We appreciated having you in our services last Sunday. Hope you'll come back." Or, "I understand that you've been ill and under the weather, that you are a neighbor of one of our members. Brother so-and-so or Sister so-and-so. Hope you're feeling better. Or one of our members told us that you had just lost your husband. I wanted to send you this personal card to tell you we're praying for you. We're thinking of you. What does a person think when they get a card like that? I'll tell you, many people think, wow, that's unusual. That's special. That's compassionate, because somebody sat down and thought about me and wrote me a personal message. Well, that's just an example of how one area of this could work, the so-called compassion cards. And if you cannot conduct a Bible study, maybe you could write out 5 cards or however many it is each month for a while and see what a difference that makes. Oh, by the way, I want to tell you something. Some of you are tremendous card writers. I know that because you have sent me cards. You know how to put words together in a card that is just beautiful. And if I were Mark Norris, I'd be knocking on your door. Hey, how about heading up team number 1? So think about the talents that God has given you and your ability to help with compassion cards. Let's look at one other in closing here. Look at this one, visitors. You know, I mentioned that we do have visitors this morning. We are so blessed here at Central because almost never a week goes by that we don't have some visitors. And these visitors many times are prospects. Some of them actually check the box on the visitor's card that says, I'm interested in a Bible study. Or, I'd like to know more about the Church of Christ. I'm new to the area. I'm looking for a church. We had one just 2 weeks ago that said, I'm visiting around looking for a church. You know what those are? Those are opportunities or prospects that the Lord is laying at our feet. Visitors. Well, how would it work if this could be organized a little more in terms of evangelism? Trying to reach the lost in the area of visitors. Well, suppose that there were 2 coordinators. That the elders asked Jim Tanis, Bill Wall, Jr., would you 2 sort of coordinate a program here of personal evangelism through our visitors? Now, these men, Jim has been working as a greeter for some time, and they already have great experience and ability, as do many others in the room here. There are already those who are doing many of these things. The elders are just talking about trying to organize this in a way that will be strategic and more effective. Suppose that those 2 coordinators could arrange to have 4 greeters each week out in our foyer, so that when visitors came through those doors, there was somebody there to smile, to greet them, to recognize them as a visitor to the Central Church of Christ. It doesn't matter whether they come before Bible class or whether they come right before the worship service, because there's somebody there to help them out. They're called greeters. And they have these little visitors cards that we're very familiar with. And by the way, you know, when COVID came, we took the visitors cards out of the pews. Are they in there now? No. Maybe they should be put back. Satan uses tools to stop good works. But whatever it is, these greeters are going to have plenty of visitors cards. Because if you can encourage a visitor to fill out a visitor's card, you are 9/10 of the way home. And if you can get them to do it legibly, you're 9.5. fill it out for them. Fill it out for them. These guest cards are provided so that we can have a record of your presence as a visitor. Now, does that mean we're going to pester these people? We're going to put them on a distribution list and an email list, and every week they're going to be getting something from the central? No. Not unless they want it. If they want to receive our bulletin every week, we can do that by email. All you got to do is ask. They may get a letter from the preacher on behalf of the church, on church letterhead, thanking them for coming and inviting them back. These guest cards are provided for these greeters who are going to be getting to the church building a little bit early so they can be at their post and ready for visitors. And they're going to greet the visitors. How do you greet a visitor? Well, you say, hello. Hello. No, I can do that. You can do that. Of course, it means I'm going to have to break away from talking to Anthony Roach. I'm going to have to say, Anthony, I see a visitor. Excuse me. Hello. You know what Anthony's going to do? He's going to turn and do the same thing. Hey, good to have you. I greet them. I say hello. I maybe hand them a bulletin. You know, if you can get a bulletin into somebody's hand before they sit down for the worship service, it will help orient them as to where they are and what's happening and what's coming. It will make them feel like they have some insight into where they are. Who are these people? You may want to sit near them. Oh, Bob, now you're meddling. You've gone too far now. I can't do that. This is where I sit. Well, listen, I understand that. I'm a creature of habit too. But if some special visitors come through the door of your house, where would you sit? Think about that. We are in God's house, so to speak. This is the meeting house for the church. When visitors come into, quote, our house here, let's treat them as an honored guest. Think about sitting close to them, maybe maintaining a little bit of a conversation with them. Good to have you. Where are you from? Are you local? Are you traveling? It's nice to have you here. You may want to invite them to a meal. You know, the elders made a statement in one of the meetings, and I think some of you should hold them to this. By the way, none of our elders are here this morning. So I'm going to say something here. Jonathan, just plug your ears for a minute. Just pretend like you didn't hear this. If you see visitors coming into our church building and you warm up to them and you sit with them and you give them a bulletin and you encourage them and you invite them to a meal over here at the near restaurant and you pay for their dinner, you reach into your wallet to pay and you realize, well, this is my last $20, $40, $60. This is it. I can't afford this. The elders will reimburse your meal. Now, you didn't hear that, Jonathan. The elders will reimburse you. If you just cannot afford to do this, ask for help. Folks, this is important. I'm being somewhat facetious, but this is serious. Because what we're trying to do, we're not trying to bribe people or say, hey, you come every Sunday, we'll buy you a meal every Sunday. We're trying to expose people to the saving gospel of Jesus Christ. Maybe invite them to a meal. Maybe give them a gift of some kind. Some of the ladies like to give a little bag of gifts, or maybe a loaf of homemade bread, or some special gift that lets them know, hey, we care. We're glad you're here. And these visitors are thinking, you know what? There's something special about this place. These people are actually nice. I'm going to look into this a little further. You may want to, once you learn that they're in a particular business, you may want to introduce them to somebody else in the congregation. Oh, you're in the automotive business? Let me introduce you to Mandy Housley. Let me introduce you to Tristan Fasella or Katie. And how many other automotive business people? Here's Chase, and on and on. You see what's going to happen? You're making connections so that these people will have something in common. They'll talk about it, and they may very well come back. Or you can say, oh, you're driving a Ram pickup truck, and that's a diesel. Here's Josh Everson. Let me introduce you. By the way, I love that truck, Josh. That is the kind of connecting that people need, and then they come to feel a part of the group. You complete their visitor's card for them. Don't ask them to do it, just do it. Make sure that it's legible. You give that card to the preacher who will write them a letter. And that letter, I promise you, Lord willing, it'll go out quickly while the iron is still hot. And you know what you may want to do with that prospect? Fill out a card looks like this, contact card, and give it to Jonathan Bennett or to myself. A contact has been established. That person then may be appropriate to see if we can't get a Bible study set up for them. You may want to give it to Mark Norris. Say, how about sending this person some cards? Here's their situation. Or to put it all in 2 words, just be friendly. And you can do that because you do that already. It's just a matter of focusing with intentionality in personal evangelism. Now, I went a little bit over this morning. I hope you'll forgive me, but this concludes a 4-part series on Jesus, the politically incorrect evangelist. Jesus didn't do things always the way people said they should be done. He did them the way that they work. We can learn from him if we're willing to do so. If you would like to come to Jesus Christ by way of his great invitation this morning, or if you need to be baptized into the body of Christ, would you come while together